Welcome to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories. How did they find their way to the top, and how can their path help you do the same? Here's your host, network broadcaster, executive, and entrepreneur, Kraig Kann.
Right now, on this edition of Tracks to Success, you'll hear from the leader of a one-of-a-kind, in-your-face Irish-American band from the Northeast that's built quite a following. He's a songwriter, a lead vocalist, and a bass guitarist, but would probably rather have a hockey stick or a baseball bat in his hands because he's all about Boston sports. And actually, Boston sports have also become a little bit about his band. He was born in Massachusetts, raised in Massachusetts, and lives in Massachusetts. He's a self-proclaimed diehard of the Boston Bruins, the Red Sox, the Celtics, and the New England Patriots. And he's got a bit of a crush on Bobby Orr, just so you know. Celtic punk rock isn't his only thing, because there's ownership in bars and restaurants, a stake in local boxing, and a huge devotion to charity work. So what's it like to have a cult following so strong that your songs find their way to Fenway and major motion pictures? And how did all this fame come from the formation of a small little Boston band? His name is Ken Casey. He's the heart and soul of a band called the Dropkick Murphys. His inspiring story and this edition of Tracks to Success starts now. Well, Ken, I promised myself when I started this podcast that we would bring listeners the stories of people from all walks, all right? All parts of the world. I am really excited to have you. Thank you so much for being my guest.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're going to have a lot of fun. Let me start with this. You started a band back in 1996. Not punk rock, but Celtic punk. How would you describe that?
I guess it was, in the early days, in fairness, it was more punk rock just because we really hadn't learned to play that additional Celtic instrumentation. However, our influences and somewhat of our goals were to mix the two, growing up in Boston and, obviously big Irish descent and Irish music, very prevalent, but also, growing up with, being fans of punk rock music and a lot of the hardcore bands coming out of Boston. And it was just like, it kind of just was like a natural thing. Before we could really implement the two together as a full-time successful thing, on our early recordings, we had some bagpipes. And I do think also just the speaking of storytelling, like delivery of the lyrics and stuff was in that, heavily influenced by that kind of Irish storytelling thing. And, then it's like, if you build it, they will come. We were a 4-piece. And then suddenly, because a lot of the people in our lives that knew how to play those instruments were like cops and firemen, that weren't quitting their jobs, as a fireman to go play bagpipes with a punk band. But after we released our first record, a lot of kids that were fans of the band started to pick up those instruments and teach themselves how to play. And suddenly along the way, we went from a 4-piece to a 7-piece, and the Celtic nature of the band grew as we had now had accordion, banjo, and it just offers you as musicians and as a band, you can still have the same aggression, but then you can layer over all this melody, so it's a good hook.
Yeah.
To get in, like in the early days, we'd have a lot of kids say, like, yeah, I was a fan of the band, and shockingly, my father liked it, because maybe we were doing a traditional Irish song, or maybe, just enough of that Celtic melody was a hook for another generation.
Right. Well, the Dropkick Murphys, okay? You are the original, and it's kind of changed and grown, as you just talked about, along the way. What's been the key to success? because there are a lot of cities that have kind of their band, right, that they call their own, or bands that call the city their own. So what's made yours different and so special that it's had this longevity and the following?
Well, I think one of the main keys to success is low expectations, because then you'll always achieve. It's not hard to reach your goals. But to give some background on that, the band started. I had been. There was a venue called the Rat, which was short for the Ratskeller, and that was like our version of CBGB's here, and it was there forever. My mother told me it was the place she first ever had a drink with her fake ID when she was a kid. So that's the generations it's spanning, and the Rat. I would book shows at the Rat. They were kind of the owner just cared about like his night shows. So in the day, if you would, a lot of the punk shows were all ages matinees, because the owner would just say, "Hey, give me 20% of the cover at the door, and you could pay the bands with the rest." And I was just doing it to help bands that I liked, and I was always starting to say I wanted to start a band, but purely kind of as a joke, to play covers in the basement just for fun. And I was bartending at the time, and I was going to UMass Boston and working construction and bartending at Symphony Hall. And one of the kids I worked with went to Berkeley School of Music, and he said, "Hey, you're always talking about starting a band. My band has a show in 3 weeks. I dare you to open for us." And we made a $30 bet, and I got together with two friends that had some musical experience, and another like me that hadn't. We wrote 2 originals, learned 4 covers to make a 6-song set, and we played the 6 songs twice, and we packed the place with all our friends that were coming strictly to laugh at us, because it was like, "Hey, you want to come see my band?" And they're like, "What? You've never even picked up an instrument. What are you talking about?" "Oh, I got to see this," So, and they, it was just it was fun. It was a good time. And we did that like 3 or 4 times. And then we got an offer to open for a band that, we grew up listening to, that was doing a reunion. And, then the rest is history. So we started kind of growing a fan base at that Rat, and we would basically, we still all had our jobs and whatnot. So we got to a point where we were able to, sell out the Rat, which, back then to us, and with the history of that place, that was like, that was the height, that you could ever even dream of achieving. And I had no desire to do anything beyond that. But what we would do is book an all ages matinee with 8 bands. We'd headline. We'd bring in 7 bands from 7 other cities, and they'd have a great show, because the Boston punk scene in the 90s was just really unbelievable. And they'd all go back to their city owing us a show. And, they'd make sure when we came that they filled the place by hook or by crook, because they wanted to take pride in their city's kind of scene and didn't want it to be empty when we had such a good show. So even if people weren't necessarily knowing us that well,
right,
these kids in the other city were going to make sure that people were there for us.
So let's tell your story, okay? You grew up in Massachusetts, Irish heritage. Who was your greatest influence as a young child? Like, what were you as a young kid?
That was my father. My father died. He committed suicide when I was 7, and my grandfather, my mother's father, kind of took that role of a parent, and he was just, he was, the best role model you could have in terms of just hard worker. Just taught me everything that made me who I am, I guess, which was a little bit of, just taught me to stand up for myself, taught me to speak up for myself, taught me to, just got to show up and go after what you want. He was the biggest, definitely, role model in my life personally. And then, obviously, if you're talking about like outside of your life, as you and I discussed off air, it would be Bobby Orr, obviously, because he was the guy that everybody, but he carries himself in a manner that, it's really, it's funny with all that guy has done on the ice. If you ask anybody around here about Bobby Orr, the first thing they're probably not going to talk about is how great a player he was. The majority of people are going to talk about what a good guy he is and how much he does in the community, and you got to spread a lot of good. And he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't do interviews about it. He doesn't ever pat himself on the back when he does things and shows up at hospitals. There's not, camera crews there, but the word is out on all the stuff he does because, all these years of doing good stuff, like he's lit. It's a small, close-knit world here. And he's
right.
like, usually had a direct effect on somebody's family and everybody, around. And, which gets back to the story, the connection between those two is, my first words with Bobby Orr, because my grandfather just sat there saying it over and over because he wanted that to be my first words. So
your first words were Bobby Orr.
Yeah. I mean, not obviously at that age, it's not like you comprehend what you're saying. It's just,
sure.
Repeat. And, but he was going to make damn sure that that's what I, got to do. And to tie that together, I just recently got to narrate the NHL Network's documentary on the 50th anniversary of the 1970 Stanley Cup team and the famous Bobby Orr goal. And actually in the intro, the NHL Network writers wrote in the piece about, me saying, and it says, in my sake, from a grandfather to a grandfather from a grandfather to a grandson whose first words were Bobby Orr. So when I saw the script that they included that, I was like, man, practically shed a tear, So
that's cool. That's really cool. So on you as a youngster, okay, based on what you've already told me, you didn't know you were going to go into music. That just kind of fell upon you. So were you the kid young that was all into sports, big athlete in high school, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I usually don't talk too much about this part of my life, but since the nature of your program is telling your story, I will. But my teenage years, I was, I think after my father died, I went a little haywire, and I probably was in a little bit of a blur with, alcohol and drugs from probably 11 to 21. And, I did finish high school after 5 years. I did play a lot of sports, but it was always, not being able to participate in a lot of things because of chronic truancy. And, and I actually ended up, quitting drugs and alcohol when I was 21, and haven't had any alcohol or drugs in 29 years now. So my life kind of starts then. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everything else before that was really just not going anywhere fast. So yeah, that's where the story starts, when I kind of turned my life around in that regard, and was consequently a little late with everything, going to starting college when I was 21 at UMass and working and stuff. So I was kind of on a trajectory to be like a 5 or 6 year plan. And I was going to be a special ed for a special ed teaching certificate, because I was like special ed in school. Not that I had a learning disability, but I had lots of other problems. I didn't know what to do with me. So, but those special ed teachers were like, they made a big impact on me, how patient and, how good they were with me. So I figured like that would be a good spot for me to land in life. And I was 12 credits away from that, when you never know what life, throws in your lap, and started this band on a joke, and then was doing it on weekends as a joke, and then doing it on weekends as this little hobby. And then we got asked to go on our first tour, and we had to make that decision of like, oh, I'll take a semester off and I'll put my bartending job was like, especially for a teacher, because Symphony Hall in Boston, in the summers, the symphony goes out west to Western Mass to Tanglewood. So almost everyone that worked there were teachers, because you'd work the 2 jobs in the year, and then you'd have the summer off from both. And I mean, you got a pension out of that place, bartending and everything. And so no one left that job, and so, I kept saying, can I take one more, season off? But please hold my job for me, because I 100% thought I was going back.
Sure.
And be careful what you ask for. 24 years later, I still haven't gone back.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. So, tell me how Dropkick Murphys became the name of the band. I don't think a lot of people know that. Now, people in Boston might know that, but how did it start?
So, of course, when we were looking to do a show with the Bet, we only had 3 weeks to come up with the name, and we were torn between. I don't think I've ever told this publicly. Dropkick Murphys, or wait for it, the Snots.
Oh.
In which I can tell you right now, no matter what we went on to do musically, if we had chosen the Snots, I would have been long back at that bartending job and teaching many years ago, which is fine, you know what I mean? But so Dropkick Murphys we used to hear it all the time. Obviously, in my non-drinking circles, I would hear old guys say it, and my grandfather would say it, and my father-in-law talked about it. It was this kind of famous place, a guy by the name of John Dropkick Murphy, and he was a doctor, but he was also a wrestler back, like when wrestling was a little bit more, nothing was ever real, but we would fill the Boston Garden with local guys every week, and he trained boxers and stuff, and he had this kind of camp where he trained people, but he became more known for a lot of these guys would come and they'd have the shakes and stuff from being on a bender before they got to camp. So he started to experiment with kind of primitively detoxifying people with this taper down method of using like horse tranquilizers and formaldehyde and Paraki, I don't even know. And so he kind of became more known for that. So not that it was like this recovery place, but it was where you went to taper down from a binge. And so we always, obviously it wasn't around by the time I was of age, but you'd always hear the name. They put him in Dropkicks. He was in Dropkicks, and we always just thought that'd be a cool name for the band. And ironically, when we first started making shirts in the early days, like we'd play a show and sell the shirts, and then inevitably the next show kids would be like, what the hell, I get old guys stopping me on the street everywhere saying like I was in there in 1950 something. And eventually obviously the band popularity kind of took over a bit of it, but we always gave the nod to the place. And matter of fact, Dropkick's son comes to the shows sometimes and gets a kick out of it, and it's kept his name and legacy alive to a degree as well.
It's fascinating. Now, I've talked to some people who know you, okay, in a little bit of research. I've talked to some people who I didn't think would know you or the name of the band. And then they say to me, oh, yeah, the Dropkick Murphys. Oh, yeah, they're in this movie, or they're tied to this sports team in Boston. And I was blown away, which made me all the more excited to talk to you. So I'm going to rip through some things here with you. And for the sake of time, we'll go a little quicker on some of these things. But I want to get to movies and songs. But let's talk sports real quick, because I know you're jacked up about that, and you already dropped Bobby Orr on me and got way ahead of me. But the Bruins, are they your top love?
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, the Bruins are my team, yeah.
They have been forever. So Bobby Orr.
Sports teams that I have tattooed on me, put it that way.
Okay, all right. Ray Bourque, Cam Neely, or all Bobby Orr?
No, Bobby Orr was, I was born in 69. So honestly, a lot of those memories of Orr and the Cups are like home movies, and, the way that they were revered by, my grandfather and uncles and everything. So, the Ray Bourque, Terry O'Reilly at that late 70s era of O'Reilly and Cashman and all that was probably my first real teams, and then obviously the Neely Bourque era was a huge one. I know I don't want to get stuck on time, but I got to tell this quick story about Bork. I was playing in a charity game at the Garden after a Bruins Flyers matinee, and it was sold out. Nobody left because it was Bork's first time coming back to skate on the Garden ice since he left to win the cup with the Avalanche. And I happened to have been given a high number. I think it was like 44. So I was second to last being introduced before Bork. And everyone's all jacked up to cheer for Ray. And as they're announcing my name, and this is back in like, I don't know, early 2000s or something. And so we weren't exactly as, we were popular, but not like today maybe. And as they're announcing my name from the local rock band Dropkick Murphys, Ray steps too close to me on the Jumbotron so you can see his head over my shoulder. So as they're saying my name, 15, 16, 18,000 people stand up in unison for this standing ovation, only because they saw Bork's face. But they started the ovation while they were saying my name. So it was pretty epic.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know for our listeners of this podcast, you all need to know that some of these athletes from these teams that I'm dropping here, no pun intended with dropping, they're tied. They know your band. They know you. They're all in. We're going to get to charity, the work that you do in charity in just a little bit. But what about the Red Sox? 2004, the amazing comeback, right, against the Yankees to get to the World Series and then sweeping the Cardinals and all of that sort of stuff. How big are you with the Red Sox?
Oh, huge, and always was. It was just a different animal. Red Sox were always that kind of summertime, watching with your family, as the Bruins are a little more like for me. But my grandfather that same grandfather was friends with Johnny Pesky. My grandfather was a big union guy in town, and he knew everyone. And he was friends with Johnny Pesky, and when he'd take me to games as a kid, we'd wait for everyone to leave, and Pesky would let me on the field, and I'd dive on center field thinking I was Fred Lynn. I'm talking about when I was, 7, 6, 7, 8 years old. So they always had a huge spot in my heart. And in 2004, the Red Sox came to us and said, hey, we dug up this old Good Luck song that the fans used to sing. They were called the Royal Rooters. They were all Irish immigrants back in the, 1909 era through 1918. And they would sing this particular song. It was guys like, John L. Sullivan, Honey Fitz, who was JFK's grandfather. It was this all group of super fans. And that's what I hear that's where the term fanatic came from the Royal Rooters. And they used to sing this song called Tessie.
Tessie is the Royal Rooters rally cry. Tessie is the tune they always sung. Tessie echoed April through October nights after serenade installed in and young. Tessie is a maiden with a sparkling eyes. Tessie is a maiden with a love. She doesn't know the meaning.
And it was like a Broadway song at the time, but they would change all the lyrics to kind of rank on the opposing team's pitcher and whatnot. And when Ruth got traded, they stopped singing the song, and they, hence 86 year drought. So the Red Sox said, oh, maybe this is the reason we haven't won in 86 years. So we redid the song. On July 23rd, I went in the Boston Herald and proclaimed that this song would break the curse. I have that on my wall, that article. And then we debuted the song July 24th on the field against the Yankees, and they were getting killed. And we were like, well, so much for that. It didn't work so well, but that was the famous game that they, A-Rod and Veritek got in the fight, and they had the big comeback win, and Bill Miller hit a walk-off home run. And suddenly, we were playing all these games before the games in the playoffs, and wild ride. And we got to be on the field with them in St. Louis. I called my other grandfather, who my grandfather that raised me, John Kelly, was already deceased, but my other grandfather, Tom Casey, who was great grandfather, awesome grandfather as well. He was 86 years old at the time, and I called him from the field in St. Louis, and
Wow.
He was in tears. I was in tears. It was unbelievable.
That's awesome. Now, the Patriots obviously have had a few good years. They won the Super Bowl that year. And so at that time, you know, most people probably know they felt like they owned the place. They owned the sports landscape. You got the Super Bowl champ Patriots. You got the Red Sox winning the World Series. The only thing that didn't happen was the Celtics didn't win the championship that year. How big are you with the Patriots and the Celtics? You've been playing your songs at any of those games?
The Celtics, I mean, you know, Bird was my guy in the 80s growing up. But, you know, basketball, I've not stayed as, I just felt like, you know, I lost it when it was just kind of just not as much passing and finesse, and it was just slowed down a lot. I did enjoy, you know, I still watch the Celtics. I'm just not as rabid about them.
Yeah.
But they use shipping up to Boston a lot, and you know, they're very good to the drop kicks if we ever need anything. The Patriots really never. When they one of the championships they won, we've won so many I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah. There.
By the way, I'm getting, you know, it's fun to now, but like when someone talks trash on Brady now, it's just like doesn't sting as much, you know. But they never really reached out to us to do as much. We did play when they unfurled the banner after winning one of the championships. We played prior to the game, and we've sung the anthem there once, but they never really reached out the way
Belichick is not a punk rock guy. Brady doesn't like the punk rock. I could see Gronkowski
Brady,
back in the day.
Brady's been great to us. I've got to meet Brady. I've become close with his family and golf with his father, Tom Sr. And they're just, that Brady family is, I mean, with all that success, they are still such a like pure, like close knit, awesome family, awesome people. Gives you like real hope that people can, you know, not lose their marbles when they get that famous, because they are just solid people. So when I think of the Patriots, honestly, I think of the Brady family and how cool they've been to just as a family, you know.
So specific songs, you brought up Tessie, right? That came to fame in 2003 with the Red Sox. And then some of the other big time songs that you've had. Again, for our audience here, they probably don't realize Shipping Up to Boston is a part of the Academy Award winning movie Departed. Okay. And that was a platinum single for you guys. Then you got Barroom Hero, you got State of Massachusetts. What am I missing? What are the big ones that people would definitely know?
Well, I don't know that people would definitely know them, but, you know, the song Rose Tattoo is technically our second biggest song in terms of like streaming.
Wouldn't be alone. Some may be from showing up, others are from growing up. Sometimes I was so messed up and didn't have a clue. I ain't winning no one over. I wear it just for you. I got your name written here in a rose tattoo. In a rose tattoo.
You know, it's funny. We have like the two worlds. It's like we have the world where people, you know, here shipping up to Boston through sports and they're a casual fan. And then, you know, Rose Tattoo is you know, the amount of like plays it's had and streaming and spins is like getting up there close to shipping up to Boston, but it's never had any commercial play. So that's more like the fan base that knows that song. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's good to see that, like, you can go outside of the music world, like via sports and TV to help, you know, project your band. But you can also just, like, have a song that music people like, too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It goes somewhere even without commercial success or without.
But think about this for a second. I mean, you've had to pinch yourself having your music be in an Academy Award-winning movie.
Yeah, you know, I'm usually kind of a pessimist about the band, or not a pessimist, but like try to, when good things happen, I try to not be like, you know what I mean? I try to take it, oh, that's cool, you know, not get like overly excited about it. But I will admit this, when I went to the Boston premiere of The Departed, now keep in mind, we had no idea how the song was being used in the movie. We just, we just knew it was in there. And when it came on in the opening credits, it was like, wow. But it was also the volume it was at was really loud. Like we had a song one time in The Sopranos, right? And I was all excited, and I'm watching The Sopranos, and I'm watching, and I'm watching, and I'm watching, and then my phone rings, and it's a friend. He goes, "Well, that was kind of cool." And I go, "What?" And he says, "Oh, you didn't hear it. It was so low in the background that I didn't even hear the song." So, you know, you got to give credit to like not only like where it's placed in a movie, but like honestly in that the part, it's really prominent and loud in that spot. And I think that, you know, the spot and the volume had a lot to, and obviously the nature of what the movie was about had a lot to do with how it resonated, you know, to people watching the movie. You know?
No question. Ken Casey is our guest on this edition of Tracks to Success. Tracks to Success is brought to you by Presentation Partners, visual storytellers passionate about connecting presenters with their audience. By the way, I can't not ask you about the onstage fight, because if you Google Ken Casey, it just comes up, all right? So I'm sorry to do this to you, but I got to ask you, you're not even a drinker anymore, yet you got yourself bloodied in a concert. Can you just tell that story?
Which one? There's two different on-stage fights. Both got me on TMZ, so you got to be careful these days. Everything, there's a camera everywhere, boys and girls. Be careful. But you know, listen, we're very protective about our audience and everything, and you know, the security can't always see what's happening going in the crowd because we're at a different perspective standing up like that. My first TMZ episode was, you know, a white power Nazi type guy got up and started Sieg Heiling on stage, and it was at a point in the show where we at the end we let all of the fans on stage just as kind of a camaraderie, kind of, you know, unity thing to say we're not
cool,
you know, we're not afraid to mix with you guys, and so he was in and amongst the people. It was hard to see, and so I just felt like you know, we can't tolerate that on our stage or anywhere really. So I got into it with him, which was interesting because some people were like, "Good job," and other people were like, you know, there's, you know, no excuse for violence and all that. But you know, whatever. You know, getting back to my grandfather, he would taught me like, you know, and it might not be politically correct nowadays, but you know, I would have been taught you that you better hit that guy first, or I'll hit you harder when you get home. So, but the second time was a couple of years ago, and I had seen a guy elbow a girl in the face, so I went in to try to stop it, and I actually just grabbed him, and I wasn't trying to fight with him. I was trying to control the situation because the security guards didn't really notice it was going on because it was one or two people back from the barricade. And his friend happened to be a couple of steps behind him, and he was a real marksman, and he gunned a full beer off my head, and it hit me just right, and it split my head open pretty good. And yeah, but both of them ended up on TMZ, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hey,
I mean,
listen,
look, you got to be known for something. You're known for a lot of things, so we might as well throw that in there. And at least you're not the guy, you know, drinking, throwing beer bottles at other people. You just took one to the head.
Right. When it comes to ending up on TMZ, you know, there's probably a lot worse ways you can end up on there. So I'll take it, I guess.
There you go. I would agree with that. Now, you've gotten your way into the restaurant business, and your stamp is all over the city. And what I find interesting is the music that you play, and yet you got a Mexican place and some other places. And tell us about that and how you got into it, and how big has that been for kind of building the culture around the band itself?
Well, on the restaurant side, only the first restaurant we did was called McGreevy's, and it actually has the tag of America's first sports bar, and that is the original McGreevy's opened in the late 1800s and closed at Prohibition, and it was the hangout of the Royal Rooters. So after the 2004, and it never reopened. So after the 2004 World Series, we said, man, there's so much history with all these Royal Rooters and all that. We should open, you know, we should reopen McGreevy. So we opened a replica, and that's downtown. It's near Fenway. That kind of became the kind of almost like hangout of Dropkick Murphys fans to a degree. And and it's a real lot of baseball history in there. Old black and white stuff from the turn of the century, and really proud of that. And I'm really just into like designing and coming up with the concepts and, finding the deal. And, luckily a friend I grew up with, Brian O'Donnell, is a great restaurant operator. So we have a great partnership. He says, it's awesome. You shake hands, kiss babies, maybe do a little work, for the first 6 months of opening. And then I do the rest for 20 years. I do the hard work for the next 20 years of the lease. I said, hey, we all got to do our strengths there, So we opened McGreevy's, and then that just led to some different opportunities. We've done a couple of taco places, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I don't necessarily think I brand, other than McGreevy's, it's more a separate entity and not necessarily branded with the band per se. But,
but the athletes come, right? I mean, I saw Wakefield's name tied to you and some other, stars in sports in Boston.
Yeah, it's a small world here, you know what I mean? And, I've been, lucky enough to become friendly with some of these guys. I mean, there's some great athletes that have come through here and played here and stayed. But on the other hand, I'm also not the type of guy that wants to hang out with an athlete because they're an athlete, It's like, the charity foundation we have is where I've really met and become friendly with most of the athletes in town that are solid people, because, I think we have a good tradition here, like a lot of other cities in their teams, athletes and retired athletes, but especially here, I think, and a lot of that tone was set by guys like Orr and the guys on that team that really kind of, walked the talk and
sure,
and showed that you show up and you do stuff in your community.
Well, this interview doesn't come complete unless we do talk about the charity, because of all the things that's tied to you, that might be the one that maybe means the most. How did that all start, and what is the mission, if you will, for all the work that you've done to give back?
Yeah. So we were always, we always had a social consciousness about us with the band, and I think it was because none of us were really, like there's some people that they're born to be a musician, their goal in life is to play music, and they know they're going to do it from a young age. And none of us were really like that for the most part, and almost had this like guilty feeling of being like, musicians are like selfish, bums. So like, we would rehearse at 7 a.m. We used to rehearse in this music complex with all those other bands. And the guy that ran the building would say, I've been doing this for 40 years and I've never seen a rock band rehearse at 7 a.m. What the hell is this all about? People get into music so they don't have to do this. And we used to say, hey, it feels like we have a real job, and giving back, the whole charity aspect just always made us feel like it was an offset to the good fortune that we were having, but we were always involved with a million other causes. And I was having lunch with Bobby Orr and a gentleman by the name of Bob Howe and another gentleman named Lee Kennedy. They're both are friends of Bobby's, and, older guys and successful guys. And they were kind of mentors to me. And they said, why you need to do something under the banner of the Dropkick Murphys to capture all your fans' attention and get them behind it, because, it's hard to say, hey, all the fans, support this cause, support that cause. So if we do it under one banner, then we can take those funds and support other causes. So under their advice, we started that. And, the mission statement is kind of the 3 areas that are important to us, which is, substance abuse and alcoholism treatment, children's related causes, and then veterans. And unfortunately, after the war and the wars that have been going on for years, the substance abuse veteran thing is kind of melded with a lot of guys coming back and self-medicating. So that's been a large part. And then of course the tragic opiate epidemic that's hit everywhere, but Massachusetts is particularly hard. So we stay busy with raising funds to help a lot of local nonprofits that we like to help underfunded people that are doing a good job and that aren't, don't have some, director making, a 6-figure salary, so we kind of try to keep it real and keep it to the people that getting their hands dirty, and so we're mostly event driven, and that's where a lot of the relationships with the athletes have developed, and obviously having Bobby in my corner has made it easy to get a lot of the athletes and whatnot involved.
Well, in 2016, you and Dropkick Murphys received the Robert F. Kennedy Children's Action Corps Embracing the Legacy Award for all your years of charity work with various organizations, including work with children and also the veterans. And it ended up at the Kennedy Library. I mean, these things are very impressive. Like when you're talking about legacy, Ken, I'm sure that if they were writing up your stone right now, Dropkick Murphys would obviously be on there, but some of these other things are at least, if not more, meaningful.
No, absolutely. The Robert Kennedy Award is, you don't get much more respected than Robert Kennedy around these parts, and that's one of the ones that I'm like allowed to put on my shelf. I'm always told, like, we'll get you a man cave someday and you can hang all your stuff, but I never got the man cave, and everything's in boxes awards that we've got. But the Robert F. Kennedy one is actually allowed on the shelf somewhere in this house. I don't know.
You got all the restaurants though. You can put all your stuff in the restaurants. Do whatever you want. You got pubs and all that stuff. I want to ask you about the fight game, boxing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, something also tells me that if I don't throw Conor McGregor in there talking to an Irish guy, then I'm making a big mistake. You ever met him?
I have, yeah. Yeah, he used to spend a lot of his early days in Boston, one of his close friends and trainers at the time, Tom Egan, was working at a friend's gym here. And I got to meet him and spend some time with him. And then, he used shipping up to Boston for his ring walk for a while. Then he changed it to Sinead O'Connor, which is ironically, it's actually the Chieftains with Sinead O'Connor singing The Foggy Dew. He changed it to that, which ironically has been the band's intro song since, I think, 1999. And then he plays Shipping Up to Boston after, if he wins. So, and Dana White's a friend, so I've had a lot of occasions to meet Connor. And he's a good guy. I'm not too into the persona as of late, you know what I mean? But I think he's trying to dial that back a little bit. But I'm not, I'm more of a boxing guy anyway. So
how did that start? How did you get into the fight game and boxing and all of that within the city? And tell us about that.
So I thank that same grandfather for, getting me into boxing the way he did hockey and everything else. And, always been a huge fight fan, always just been around friends that, boxed. And, but I had a friend named Danny O'Connor, who was a Olympic alternate in Beijing in 2008. Unbelievable amateur career. He won, he was one of the only guys to win, I think, Hearns and Leonard, two others in that weight division that won both the national amateur championship and the national Golden Gloves in the same year. And so as a pro, he came out and he was 14-0. Then he had his first loss on Showtime. And, I was just watching with friends, and he would help with the charity. And I'm watching, man, here's this kid with this decorated amateur career, Olympic alternate, but he's, not getting good opportunities. He's not getting treated well by his promoter. He's got a newborn baby. He's got to go down to Texas and train, yet still be expected to sell tickets to his fights. Just seeing that kind of rotten underside to what is asked of someone in boxing, even when they're viewed as an elite boxer at times. And I said to myself, man, I think I can help him. And my plan was, as an Irish-American Boston kid, I figured I'm just going to get involved and like introduce him to the Dropkicks fans via social media. But then he starts saying, well, man, could you like manage me so you could, help me with these sharks in the water around? I said, yeah, I'll manage it. And then his promoter's not doing anything. So I said, well, why don't I just promote you? I know how to like fill the buildings. I mean, it's not, rocket science. You promote someone and so I started promoting. And I got a kick out of that. I think it really did reinvigorate my entrepreneurial spirit of the early days of the band of, because I tell you, boxing isn't what it used to be. So you're pushing a rock up the hill. Mm-hmm. But it is a fight town here, and we've been doing it 9 years, and we've had a world champion. We have multiple people ranked in the top 10 in the world. Murphys Boxing is the company, and obviously the band's fan base got behind it. So and the band's fans are awesome. Whereas if we introduce someone and say this is our guy, then they're their guy. And they came and supported him, even if they weren't big fight fans. And yeah, it's a labor of love. I love the game, and so in helping Danny, and then of course other local fighters. So, can you help me? And the next thing you know, we've got a roster of 20 fighters, and I probably spend more time working on that than anything else in my life, which is scary. I don't know how that happened, but So I like a challenge, and but the boxing game in a business perspective is not set up for the independent promoter. You know what I mean? You got your top rank, you got your
Sure.
Golden Boy, you got your Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, and I work well with all those people. They know that if they want to come to Boston, they've got to go through me, just because of my relationships with the boxing commission and everything here. It'd just be easier to work with me than come and do it on your own. So I've got to partner with them a lot, but at the same time, that in boxing, if you're a small independent promoter, but it's rigged for the promoter that's got the TV deal and all that. And Dana White's started doing boxing on the UFC streaming platform called UFC Fight Pass, and that's been great for us because he's helped us with that. But will Murphy's Boxing ever have a deal with Showtime or whatever? No, probably not. So, I don't think I'll ever unseat Bob Arum. That's for sure. Nor do I want to. So.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the Kann Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, empowering team and individual workshops, mind-altering webinars, and Kraig's inspiring keynotes for your conference or company meeting. They're all on the menu of services. Kann Advisory helps companies clarify their message, helps professionals build and showcase their brand, and helps everyone present their best selves. So if you're the leader of a team or company looking to give your employees a game-changing one-day experience, or an individual who wants to become a speaker and presenter that gets other people talking, visit cannadvisory.com. And when you do connect, make sure to mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive a special discount on any of the Kann Advisory services. That's cannadvisory.com. Now back to the interview.
We're talking with Ken Casey from the Dropkick Murphys. Ken, in our remaining time, I want to throw something out there. You were involved in a motorcycle accident in 2018. Some pretty serious stuff. Included in that, you lost the feeling in your hands. You couldn't play the guitar, right? You were out of your job, if you will, to the degree that you were on stage leading the way, playing the instrument and all that. Did you think it was over at that point? And if so, did it make you reflect on all you'd accomplished, all you'd done, if all of a sudden, I can't do this anymore?
No, I never thought it was over. First of all, just for clarity, it kind of got misrepresented via social media. It was actually an old accident. And I had always battled the pain of it. And then I just finally lost all feeling in my arm. So it wasn't a current accident, but when I had the operation, I didn't know how long it would be. until I could play again. But I never thought it was over. I just thought that I would just kind of assume a different role. So I temporarily, anyway, was because I sing and play, but Al Ba just sings, and we trade off on a lot of songs. And so here we are now. We had a kid that worked for us playing for me, and then I'm up there just singing with Al. And ironically, at the time, Al had just lost his dad, and he was struggling bad with that. And he just, he wasn't able to like put on the face, you know what I mean, to be up front all alone. And there's the big man's got a plan, because
sure,
we were kind of just leaning on each other, and then we started to have so much fun with that dynamic that when I healed, and we love Kevin, who was filling in for me, we basically said, Kevin, you can stay, and we're going to keep it this way. And it actually works for us too, because when we're playing a lot of the larger stages, like say in Europe, where we have more popularity, Al's on one side, I'm on the other, and you feel like it can like engage everyone a lot more at the same time. So we feel like it kind of at 20 something years into the band kind of gave us a new twist and a new energy or whatever. And
right.
So everything happens for a reason. Yeah, you might think something's I guess it's always the glass half full, and if you can either look at it as you're coming to an end, or you're coming to a new beginning.
Ken, couple of things before we go. Do you speak to groups? And if so, what's your message? What would you tell people who maybe want to create a unique path like you have? What would you tell them?
I mean, my message is simple in the sense that you got to take the bull by the horns and do it yourself. And I'll give you the example is at the time, in the mid 90s, if you wanted to make it in music, you started with getting your glossy band photos and doing your bio and making a demo. We never did that. We just pressed our own records, and we toured and we played shows, so my attitude, whether it's boxing, restaurants, it's just like, just do it, figure it out. Don't wait for someone else to give you the break, because that break never may come. And I guess it's that true entrepreneurial spirit and that true spirit of like believing in yourself and just going for it. And I know, and obviously in every business and stuff that might not apply, but it's applied for me in multiple different facets of my life, because I definitely came from a background where no one was waiting to hand me a silver spoon, so you better go out and find your own way. And so far so good. I'm still not back bartending yet, you know what I mean, but I think they'll take me back, because I had a good reputation there. So I think if I go back after 25 years, maybe I'll still have a job.
Well, with the name you've built in Boston and the recognition and all that, you have truly built a brand, and you've developed a following for everybody within the band and for your own name as well. This podcast is called Tracks to Success. My final question, is this a dream? Is it still a dream, or is it a job that keeps you up at night thinking about how I can do better, what I'm going to do next? Or as much as you've talked about just kind of rolling with it, is that how you live?
Oh yeah, it seems more like just how I live. I mean, I have that active kind of mind that works at night anyway. So I think no matter what I did, I'd probably be up thinking about how I could do it better. Am I doing enough, or overthinking my life? But to a degree, at this point, is just rolling with it. You can't never let it be a job, and I think that's where some of that other stuff has served the point with the boxing and the restaurants. Whereas when maybe the band was becoming a little bit of a job because it was so focused that I needed to widen the view and kind of recharge my mind again. But I think it's just rolling with it, because a lot of times if you got to be driven, but if you get so narrowly focused on something, the off ramp that you might have been supposed to take for greater success, you might miss. So I think it's just a matter of always working hard, but always having that kind of peripheral vision to where is this going to take me, because it might not be the path that I exactly thought.
Yeah. Well, the Bruins are one of the original six, and there's no question that you are an original. Your band is an original. I congratulate you on all your success, not just on stage and the fans that you're with, but also all the people you've been able to impact and the give back and the pay it forward. It's impressive. Ken, I can't thank you enough for being on Tracks to Success.
Well, thanks for having me. It was great. Thank you.
In our conversation, Ken shared stories about his band taking off and the network he's built for himself and the following that's come from all the hard work, which leads me to my one last thing. If you want to be an influencer, don't focus your attention on chasing a following. Focus on the product. Deliver what the audience wants. Do it better and better each time. Most importantly, be your own brand and your own style and do it your own way without fear of not blending in just like everybody else. Ken's music has found his way into movies and it's found its way into stadiums and arenas, not because the music is better than everyone else's, but because it's catchy and it has a stickiness factor that's magnetic and obviously memorable. I've said this countless times in my workshops. When you stand up, find a way to stand out. Don't wait for people to pay attention. Become one with your audience. Make people pay attention by delivering something so special that they'll be emotionally connected and charged to go share the story with others. The Dropkick Murphys have a following, and you can too. Figure out what makes you unique and special, and then go deliver it with that energy, just like Ken has each and every day. Do that, your tracks to success become a whole lot easier. And if you have a guest you think belongs on Tracks to Success, email me at info@canadvisory.com. I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Kraig Kann. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners, visual storytellers passionate about connecting presenters with their audience. Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. You can follow Kraig on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @Kraig Kann. And for exclusive Tracks to Success content and news about our upcoming guests, you can find Tracks to Success on Twitter. It's @Tracks to Success.